Okay, so good morning. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, first of all, for having me. Merci beaucoup pour l'invitation. I will speak English. However, you know there's translation in French, Spanish, English, and Italian. So that's very, very important. You'll see that I'm over there. I'm Tom. I've moved my seat to the middle, so hopefully you can still figure out where I'm sitting. I actually used to work at the ETUC for years, and now I'm the spokesperson for the European Left Group in the Parliament. So I'm very happy to be back among brothers and sisters in the trade union movement. And I think I want to say that we have an excellent panel here this morning. Perhaps the best panel that you will have all morning. Not to say that it is the only panel that we have this morning, but it is the best panel. So I just want to say, you know, it's a local, national, European level. Unions often need to look outside just their membership to enact change. So I just want to introduce this panel first to say who it is. And believe me, since I'm speaking first, you all get a chance to correct me and say, oh, I didn't do that at all. But here we are. So first, right beside me, I have someone else from the ETUC, and that is the Deputy Secretary General. This is Isabelle. Isabelle Schömann. She's a trade union leader. She's the Deputy Secretary General, as I said, and I'm very happy to sit beside her once again. Over here, we have Chloé Mikolajczak. There we go, yeah. Has worked in numerous European NGOs, climate, economic issues, just to name a couple of your issues. You can probably speak a little bit more, and you participate in creating citizens' collectives. That's right. And Matteo Ariano is a labor inspector who has collaborated with several journals, a focus on issues related to improving the efficiency of labor market inspections. So very interesting. Over here we have Nathan Stewart, climate campaigner, peace activist. He's active in the international peace movement and a community organizer in his local neighborhood. And then over here standing up we have Jane Parker, senior researcher with the European Trade Union Institute. And she's also an adjunct professor at Massey University in New Zealand. And she works on a lot at the moment, including gender equity, the living wage, and inclusive trade union governance. So how we're going to do, we're going to give the floor to Jane. She's going to give a presentation, and then we're going to talk about it. Everyone okay? Jane, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Tom. Good morning, everybody. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. I am height challenged, so I hope you can see me over the podium here on the left. But I'm going to rattle through a project that was still underway. It was commissioned of the ETUI by the ILO ACTRAV. So it's going to be fairly... oh, there is a... Oh, that's super. That's better. Here we are. Nothing magical, it is a stool. So this project is underway, and I'm delighted to give you the first cut, if you like, some of the initial findings. Not all of the findings or research themes, but at least an insight into some of the things that are going on when it comes to inclusive union governance and also reaching out to new or additional worker groups. Okay. So this is the team that's involved. It involves my university as well as ETUI researchers who are an absolute delight to work with. And just as a very brief overview about the study, it was commenced earlier this year when we were approached by ILO ACTRAV to undertake it. There is an interim report that will be coming out in November, December, if you're interested, which will flesh out a lot of the things I'll talk about today, because there is a lot of qualitative material that I won't be able to go into. A survey was disseminated in July to a number of union confederations, federations, and affiliates, and it was also nuanced in terms of coverage by the higher level union bodies, talking about some of the initiatives undertaken by union bodies at other levels. We are undertaking interviews with a number of the survey respondents from around the world as I speak, and that material will become available in due course. And hopefully, as I say, that report will be out towards the end of the year and publicly available. So what I'd like to do with this project is just focus on two key aspects given the organizers briefed to me, and those are looking at inclusive union governance initiatives and also reach activities, particularly to groups that haven't been organized beforehand. Okay. So, don't worry, I'm not going to go through this table, but it's just to give you an idea of the bodies that are involved, the union bodies, and you can see that they are at different levels well, they were. There we are. They are at different levels. In the European setting, we have the DGB, who have been talking to us also about affiliates. And those that are in yellow are the union bodies where we're undertaking interviews at the moment. But you can see quite a global spread, not a representative sample, but one that includes a lot of confederations where we haven't heard a lot before. So in countries such as Senegal, Kazakhstan, and so forth, we're starting to hear about their initiatives and hope to report on that. So the report is descriptive as well as analytical in nature. Okay, so just to go through this quite quickly, these pie charts represent union bodies that are engaging in different types of initiatives to hear different or diverse worker groups in their union governance bodies. And you can see that a good 28 out of 30 of the unions that were surveyed said, yes, we do this. We have mechanisms of this nature. Now, when we start to break this down into the types of worker groups that we're talking about here, we're looking at not only the identity characteristics of workers themselves, so for example, youth, migrant natures, gender and so forth, but also the worker characteristics or work areas from which they hail. So that might be the informal economy, the gig or platform economy, and so forth. And we were quite interested in these particular findings because they show that in the vast majority of cases for the unions in the sample, there are initiatives that are explicitly articulating a desire to include the voices and interests of these particular worker groups. And you can see here that the pie charts talk about emerging tech sector workers, emerging green sector workers, women and youth. And I go over the page. These are some other groups: migrant workers, persons with disabilities, self-employed, platform workers, and also informal economy workers. And in the European context, these are to some or greater or lesser extent groups that are considered for organizing a mobilization. In some of the contexts, countries and regions beyond Europe, we're finding that they are almost the mainstay of some of the union business, which is an interesting finding in itself, and suggests that lessons learned aren't always emanating from Europe and going outwards, but indeed can go the other way. So what sort of mechanisms are being used to include these diverse workers' voices in union governance structures? Well, some of the more established areas pertain to women workers, youth workers, migrant workers, and informal economy workers. And it's usually multiple levels of activity and taking multiple forms. So for youth and women in particular, we see women's and youth structures around committees, designated posts, and then in union mainstreams it could be proportional representation, quotas, and designated seats. And there are also additional initiatives which I've outlined on this slide for you. When we look at migrant workers, the slightly different profile here, many outward, or what we might call outward-facing initiatives by unions, integrating and working alongside external bodies and migrant groups at local through to international levels. To give you a quick example, Kenya's central union body has its own trade unions migrant resource center, for example, whilst the Mexican Confederation has a number of informal mechanisms that help to integrate migrants into employment. And you can imagine this involves a wide gamut of external as well as internal bodies. Okay, and then just to focus briefly on informal economy workers, which are very important and increasingly so in a number of the union confederations and other bodies, we see a number of conventional union mechanisms, but also some quite innovative strategies and initiatives as well. So one example, for example, at the bottom there is the General Labor Union of Lebanon, which is using various monitoring, inspection, and other activities, and this is conducted by the National Social Security Fund with the assistance of the Ministry of Labour to declare informal economic workers. And it's based also on complaints submitted by the General Confederation of Labour. So quite a lot of integration into formal mechanisms, but also a number of informal mechanisms at different levels being utilised. And not to put too fine a point on it, those in the white bolded font are other worker groups that are being recognised and sought to be represented by their union confederations through to affiliates. That's gone quite white. And I've given you examples here also I hope you can see them, of the kinds of mechanisms that are being employed. So we're seeing that the mechanisms are tailored to the workers' demands and interests and ways of engaging with the labour market, as well as to their country context, sectoral context, sometimes international transitional dynamics, and other factors specific to their particular union confederation. Now, the organisers, Tom and Ilke, asked me to try and incorporate a little bit about climate change, and so we did. We asked our respondents around the world, can you tell us a little bit about macro transitions and how they might impact on union capacity to reflect diverse worker needs and to incorporate them into union governance? And indeed, all of the macro transitions that we listed and some others that came from the respondents were seen to be significant in this respect. And that includes climate change, where 22 out of 30 of the respondents said, yes, this influences union capacity in this regard. Only 4 felt that it wasn't important, and 4 said it was not applicable. And sometimes reason given were things like it doesn't directly impact on the core business or way that we go about doing things, but it might be seen as a more peripheral issue, at least at this stage. And looking to the future, what are the additional worker groups that unions might seek to try and cover, organise and represent effectively? Well, perhaps encouragingly, half of the sample, that's 15, of these union bodies said that they would consider covering and working with additional worker groups. And another quarter said that they would look to cover more than one such group. Examples include, for example, in the South Pacific, the Tonga National Workers Committee, Council, which would set up ad hoc committees on a when and as basis in relation to climate changes that directly impact on certain sectors of workers. We also have some information from East Timor's Trade Union Congress, and then if you look at Nepal's Trade Union Congress, you can see again multiple groups are in the sights of the Confederation for future organising. Most commonly cited additional worker groups for organising in the future. First of all, informal economy workers, then platform, disabled, migrant, oops, we keep getting this, migrant, youth and cultural workers. Perhaps it's putting extra emphasis on that part of the presentation. Thanks, Ilke. Okay.
It's a very nice slide, Jane.
Oh, thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much. So a quarter would look at covering more than one of these types of groups, as I mentioned before. Now, those are the most commonly cited additional workers groups under the first bullet point, but you can see there's a whole range of other types of groups that might well also be represented in the future, including unpaid care workers, domestic workers, temporary workers, agricultural workers, and so forth. And you can see here there's some category, if you like, slippage. For example, with domestic workers in some domains being considered separate from informal economy workers and vice versa. I've given you a case there of the Lebanese Federation, which looks at, or wants to look at 5 or 6 different additional worker groups, and some of the mechanisms in the bolded white font there, which are the means by which they would hope to do so. So you can see these are tailored responses, often outward-facing, involving external bodies, social movements, and other entities, but it's not plain sailing. So in some cases, even from limited survey information, confederations and others indicated to us that there were limitations on where they felt they could extend their reach to. So the Confederation for Workers in El Salvador, for example, said, we will not represent workers who are not permanent. And the rationale was that this was to protect the permanency of their said members. In another case of Colombia, it was felt that cultural workers, they have structures to try and listen to their voice and in their governance mechanisms, but sometimes that doesn't pan out very well. They're not engaging effectively or reaching all of those workers very easily. So there are challenges ahead. And very quickly, what sort of reach activities did they come up with? Well, based on the literature, we listed about 20 or so potential initiatives. And interestingly for us, all of them were cited by at least one of the unions as a future mechanism they would like to employ. The most common are the top 5 there, which are communication campaigns, novel events, so unions going to non-union events such as sports activities to try and contact new members, training union reps on organising diverse workers, and also public awareness raising bottom-up grassroots and informal activities. And then if I take you to the last table, which is the other half of that, you'll see that these are activities that aren't planned in such numbers, but nonetheless there is some indication that they will take place. So a wide, again, a varied and wide array of activities to try and bring new people into the union fold and to take account of the way in which they engage with work and their respective interests. So, just to wrap up, nearly all of the unions in our global sample, which is not representative, but it is interesting, as I say, in that it includes a number of bodies that are not normally sampled, they basically all aim to have representation that articulates the interests and the voices of different worker groups, be they from formal employment, as many of those in European unions are, or from informal sectors, unpaid and identity-based backgrounds. The mechanisms are tailored and they take multiple forms, as does their level of formality, how close they are to the ground, and whether they are outward-facing and link up with external bodies or not. All of the major transitions are seen to be pertinent to union capacity to represent diverse worker voices and needs, and that includes climate change, which of course has some rather vast implications for union strategy. And looking ahead, it's kind of encouraging that union innovation is being linked to revival strategy as well, with half of the bodies thinking about trying to address the needs of additional worker groups that they currently don't cover, and also a number of bodies thinking about innovative and varied ways of doing this. So I've listed some of the examples about that on this slide. And just to wrap up and say, the report will come out, and it also seeks to look at strategy and links between inclusive union governance, innovative servicing, which I haven't talked about, and also reach activity. And I'd be delighted to share it with you if it's of interest. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jane. Very appreciated. I think that some of the things that I've noticed is you see that organizations like the ETUC have really pushed for trade union renewal, and I know certain other unions within the ETUC have been very, very vocal and behind that initiative. So, but I want to start with a question. I'm going to start with Isabelle, if that's okay, because you see these findings, you see how we reach out and structures and governance, but then I guess I wonder, because you did quite good work, if you don't mind me saying, on the due diligence directive, and I know that you worked with other organizations outside that weren't necessarily the direct membership, and I just wonder, when the ETUC is looking to build coalitions with the outside in order to get real changes, do you think that was a good example of reach out for the trade unions? Please, Isabelle.
Yeah. Merci beaucoup. Je vais m'exprimer en français. C'est une possibilité qu'Eurocadre me donne aujourd'hui et je vais la prendre. C'est pas tous les jours. Je voulais aussi d'abord, avant de répondre à ta question, Tom, remercier Eurocadre d'inviter la CES, la Confédération européenne des syndicats, à participer à vos travaux. Travaux très importants puisque un congrès, c'est le cœur, c'est la vie du mouvement syndical, et bien sûr, ça nous permet d'anticiper et de préparer l'avenir ensemble. Et je pense que c'est très important, et je voulais remercier Eurocadre pour ça, aussi pour les travaux très détaillés et très coordonnés que nous menons ensemble sur beaucoup de sujets, et aussi la demande qui m'a été faite d'expliquer une pratique qui n'est pas une pratique ordinaire du mouvement syndical européen, et bien sûr de nous permettre de discuter les possibilités que nous avons et que nous devons prendre en compte pour sortir un petit peu de ce que j'appellerais notre zone de confort. C'est-à-dire, effectivement, on est là pour représenter nos membres, et il y en a qui s'arrêtent là, sur des sujets qui deviennent des sujets beaucoup plus vastes. Et je pense que Jen a montré aussi la nécessité de sortir de l'Europe, de sortir du national, de l'Europe, pour effectivement regarder au-delà de ce qui se passe et au-delà de l'impact, et je reviens sur ta question, l'impact des opérations des entreprises, des activités des entreprises sur la chaîne de valeur. Et effectivement, le devoir de vigilance qui a été initié en France en 2017 est un des exemples clés pour nous. Il a fallu plus que la France pour mobiliser l'Europe. Il a fallu derrière la France l'Allemagne pour mobiliser l'Europe sur un devoir de vigilance. Et l'Europe a été et est encore mobilisée sur le devoir de vigilance après une directive qui a été adoptée démocratiquement en 2024 et qui est maintenant malheureusement remis en question. Mais on reviendra un peu plus tard sur cette remise en question d'une façon, je dois le dire quand même, d'une façon unilatérale et d'une façon non expliquée par la Commission européenne, due au changement des forces politiques au niveau du Parlement européen. Et je pense que là, c'est un retour sur la discussion d'hier et que je pense qu'on aura encore aujourd'hui, l'impact de l'extrême droite sur les mouvements politiques en Europe et un impact très concret, notamment sur ce dossier-là, qui est le devoir de vigilance. Alors de quoi parle-t-on sur le devoir de vigilance? On parle du respect des droits humains dans la chaîne de valeur. Les droits humains, ce sont des droits fondamentaux reconnus au niveau international jusqu'au niveau européen dans des textes fondamentaux, que ce soit les conventions de l'OIT, que ce soit aussi les traités de l'Union européenne. L'Europe, la Commission européenne, doit défendre les droits humains pour l'ensemble des opérations qui se situent, opérations économiques et commerciales, qui se situent dans le marché commun, le marché intérieur. Et donc, la Commission a bien donc compris que la France plus l'Allemagne sont ces deux gros moteurs économiques qui ont adopté des législations au niveau national, était un signal clair. Pour nous, c'est un signal, je dirais, qui n'était pas nouveau, mais qui était important de renforcer. Et pour nous, comme je l'ai souvent dit à mes collègues, c'est essentiel de s'engager parce que c'est une autoroute, si je peux m'exprimer ainsi, une autoroute pour accéder au travers de la chaîne de valeur à tout l'ensemble des sous-traitants où l'on sait que justement la sous-traitance est un des modèles économiques. Pour ne pas respecter les droits des travailleurs, pour ne pas respecter les obligations notamment liées à l'environnement. Et donc c'était important pour nous de s'engager d'une façon extrêmement forte parce que nous savions que depuis des années aussi au niveau international, donc au BIT, cette discussion sur une convention ou un traité sur le devoir de vigilance n'avançait pas. Et donc on a pris cette opportunité qui, grâce à l'action de la France et de l'Allemagne, a permis à l'Europe de travailler sur ce sujet et d'adopter une directive, non pas essentiellement, malheureusement, pour protéger les droits humains tout au long de la chaîne de valeur, mais pour assurer qu'il n'y ait pas une concurrence déloyale sur le marché intérieur, peu importe. L'idée, c'était quand même de promouvoir les droits fondamentaux des travailleurs, parce que les droits des travailleurs et les droits syndicaux, ce sont des droits humains. Et donc, pour cela, il a été relativement clair que nous n'étions pas les seuls à être intéressés à promouvoir cette initiative au niveau européen, et c'était une très bonne chose. Ça a nécessité des discussions internes à la Confédération européenne des syndicats, parce qu'effectivement, là, nous avons un grand nombre de confédérations nationales, mais aussi de fédérations sectorielles, qui défendent l'idée qu'on ne peut protéger que nos membres syndiqués, que les travailleurs syndiqués, parce que c'est la différence que nous faisons entre ceux qui sont syndiqués, qui ont plus de droits ou plus de protection, et les autres qui devraient donc bien voir que c'est intéressant de se syndiquer. Donc cette discussion, nous l'avons eue, mais je pense qu'il faut aller au-delà de ce que j'appellerais un closed shop. Il faut aller au-delà parce que nous avons des responsabilités sociétales, nous avons des responsabilités qui ne s'arrêtent pas à la France, qui ne s'arrêtent pas à l'Allemagne, qui ne s'arrêtent pas à l'Europe, mais qui sont concrètement des dimensions qui sont notamment internationales et sociétales. Nous savons que si les travailleurs sont dans des situations très précaires, ce ne sont pas simplement ces travailleurs-là qui sont dans des situations très précaires, ce sont leurs familles. S'il y a des atteintes au droit à l'environnement, alors qu'il y a un principe de précaution que l'Union européenne doit prendre en compte et qui n'est pas utilisé ou qui est décrié notamment par la partie patronale, il faut ramener ces principes à leur juste valeur et il faut les utiliser. Nous avons donc commencé à s'intéresser à qui était autour de la table. Et bien sûr, autour de la table, il y avait notamment l'international, pas simplement la Confédération internationale des syndicats, mais d'autres acteurs extrêmement puissants, notamment des acteurs puissants qui sont très influençables, qui influencent l'Union européenne très fortement, non pas sur le secteur de la dimension des droits humains, mais dans le secteur des accords internationaux, des accords commerciaux. Et donc on s'est mis vraiment en contact avec ces institutions-là. Nous avons aussi regardé au niveau européen quels étaient les acteurs de la société civile, des associations très représentées qui au niveau européen et qui ont même, je dis, qui font partie de registre de la transparence qui est mis en place par l'Union européenne pour cette forme de lobby. Et donc nous sommes mis en contact avec eux. Et c'est grâce à cet ensemble, je dirais, de représentants de la société civile que nous avons pu avancer d'une façon tout à fait proactive et avec beaucoup de succès jusqu'en 2024 et encore maintenant, je dois avouer, pour démontrer l'intérêt et la nécessité d'agir maintenant au niveau européen, pour essayer aussi de déconstruire tout le récit, pas seulement patronal, mais aussi des forces politiques conservatrices, libérales, pour nous dire que l'économie, elle peut régler tout, donc vous inquiétez pas, laissez-nous faire, surtout pas de règles. Donc l'arrivée, je dirais, d'une façon extrêmement offensive et agressive, voire même hostile, de la simplification, qui est maintenant devenue la déréglementation, dont on a réussi à lever le voile qui était sur cette simplification dont on nous parle depuis l'arrivée en 2024 de la deuxième commission von der Leyen. La simplification, on nous a dit, on nous a rassurés dès le départ, parce qu'on n'est pas dupes, que la simplification, ce n'était surtout pas la déréglementation, qu'on ne toucherait pas aux droits des travailleurs et aux droits de l'environnement. Mais bon, on va quand même regarder et on va mettre sur la table un texte qui déconstruit, qui vide totalement la directive sur le devoir de vigilance. Oups, il y a quand même quelque chose qui n'allait pas là. Et donc on a insisté de dire mais non, vous ne pouvez pas commencer à changer les règles, et notamment les règles de consultation des parties prenantes. Alors là, pour le coup, c'est un peu tout le monde, hein, mais c'est surtout les syndicats, c'est surtout la partie patronale. Et là, le changement des règles sur ce sujet-là, on l'a compris très rapidement, c'était pour faire ce qu'on appelle un test case, hein, c'est pour ouvrir la boîte de Pandore et permettre avec cette première initiative, si elle réussit, si la Commission européenne arrive à déconstruire ce texte, avec l'aide du Conseil, avec l'aide du Parlement européen, la partie très libérale, conservatrice et d'extrême droite du Parlement européen, eh bien, il y a d'autres initiatives de ce genre qui vont être mises sur la table, qui le sont déjà pour le coup. Vous avez entendu parler de cet omnibus, enfin bref, on ne sait pas trop, en fait, ce paquet commun qui arrive, on en a 6 qui attendent que le premier soit finalisé, que la Commission espère finaliser en fin 2025, donc même pas un an, pour réviser une directive pour laquelle on a mis plus de 6 ans à travailler et arriver d'une façon tout à fait démocratique. D'où l'idée de s'associer sans perdre, je dirais, sans perdre l'esprit du mouvement syndical, sans perdre les valeurs du mouvement syndical, en les partageant. Effectivement, il faut partager des valeurs que l'on a. On n'est pas les seuls à défendre les droits humains au national, à l'Europe et à l'international. Et c'est bien comme ça, parce que effectivement, il est important que d'autres forces qui sont peut-être plus écoutées. Et là, je vais vous donner un exemple qui, pour moi, était assez parlant et que je n'avais pas anticipé, mais pour lequel j'ai laissé l'espace au niveau national pour renforcer notre travail au niveau européen. C'est le rôle de l'association Caritas en Allemagne, qui a été, je ne dirais pas l'un des moteurs clés, mais peut-être l'une des voies décisives pour influencer un gouvernement conservateur, à l'époque encore la chancelière Angela Merkel, pour adopter une législation pour laquelle nous savions pertinemment que le mouvement patronal extrêmement fort en Allemagne avait mis tellement d'énergie et tellement d'argent et tellement d'efforts pour prévenir et pour empêcher cette directive, cette loi nationale d'aboutir, que ce mouvement-là, avec bien sûr les syndicats et bien d'autres associations, ont pu faire la différence. Et je pense que c'est essentiel de voir que ensemble, et pas seulement ensemble au niveau syndical, mais ensemble avec des forces progressistes en Europe, on arrive à faire la différence. Juste pour la petite histoire, le mouvement patronal européen avait quand même démontré ou mis le doute dans l'esprit du gouvernement national que le fait que les entreprises ne respectaient pas, et là, des normes non contraignantes qui sont les lignes directrices de l'OCDE sur les multinationales et notamment le respect des droits humains, avait démontré que, en fait, vous nous dites, par rapport à une première évaluation du gouvernement, que ce sont simplement 20% des entreprises en Allemagne qui respectent ces lignes directrices. Vous vous êtes trompé, l'évaluation est biaisée, on va en faire une autre. Eh bien, ils ont quand même réussi à mettre ce doute-là dans l'esprit du gouvernement allemand. Le gouvernement allemand leur a donné une seconde chance. Vous vous rendez compte, nous, on n'a jamais une seconde chance. On n'en a jamais une. Donc, il faut qu'on mobilise au moment T et qu'on y arrive ensemble. La partie patronale allemande, le BDA, a eu une seconde chance. Eh bien, même avec cette seconde chance, ils n'ont pas réussi à démontrer que plus de 20% des entreprises allemandes respectaient les lignes directrices de l'OCDE, alors qu'il se prévaut encore aujourd'hui du fait que, bien sûr, toutes les entreprises allemandes respectent les droits fondamentaux et respectent les lignes directrices de l'OCDE. Donc voilà, il faut vraiment être très clair de ce rapport de force qui est certainement pas le même pour nous et qu'on doit utiliser toutes les chances et les premières chances parce qu'on a rarement une seconde chance et donc mobiliser. Et je voudrais finir par un autre exemple pour lequel je trouve qu'il a été pour nous très révélateur, c'est le travail des plateformes. Le travail des plateformes, ou la directive sur la protection des travailleurs des plateformes, c'est en fait important pour essayer de mettre en porte-à-faux ces modèles d'organisation d'entreprise qui ne se veulent plus être des employeurs et donc qui veulent se désolidariser du risque ou se défaire du risque qu'elles ont et mettre ce risque sur d'autres personnes et bien sûr sur les travailleurs. Et donc, l'idée première du mouvement syndical, ça a été de dire, le problème, ce n'est pas les travailleurs, le problème, c'est ces formes d'entreprises qui ne veulent plus être des entreprises, qui veulent se détacher, s'exempter de leurs obligations, notamment, mais pas seulement, envers les travailleurs. Et on s'est vite rendu compte que là, c'est un petit peu technique, mais là, nous n'avons pas les moyens pour protéger nos collègues. Et on le trouve dans d'autres directives européennes qui n'ont pas cette base légale où nous sommes les co-législateurs, et nous y reviendrons peut-être après. Et donc nous avons, si je peux m'exprimer ainsi, rapatrié le sujet là où nous avons le pouvoir au niveau européen en tant que co-législateurs pour avoir exactement la possibilité de protéger, et de façon indirecte, mais de façon tout à fait exemplaire, de défaire ce modèle d'entreprise qui est que les plateformes, ce ne sont pas des employeurs mais des intermédiaires et pour le coup, pas d'obligation envers les travailleurs. Ça, c'est un élément clé et ça nous a permis, là encore, de sortir de notre zone de confort et de se dire, ces travailleurs-là, même si c'est des auto-entrepreneurs, ils ne le sont pas. On a pu démontrer qu'ils ne l'étaient pas, mais au moment où nous mettions notre mobilisation en place, ils l'étaient encore. Eh bien, de se dire, ces travailleurs-là, nous devons les représenter. Ça a été un travail très simple pour certaines organisations syndicales nationales en Europe, au sein de la Confédération européenne des syndicats. Ça a été très difficile pour d'autres. Et là, on a dû faire vraiment un travail de fond pour permettre et pour convaincre nos collègues qu'il était nécessaire d'avancer à leur vitesse, mais de reconnaître que nous avions une responsabilité pour ces travailleurs, parce qu'en fait, ils ne sont pas de vrais auto-entrepreneurs, et que là, effectivement, nous avons un rôle à jouer, un rôle essentiel. Donc, d'ouvrir le mouvement syndical à d'autres groupes, et je pense que Jeanne en a parlé d'une façon intéressante, de leur donner leur place au niveau du mouvement syndical et au niveau de la Confédération européenne en particulier.
Thank you very much, Isabelle. That's excellent points. I think when you started, you talked about due diligence, you talked about platforms, also speaking to other groups like Caritas that helped move the German needle, if you will. And I think that speaking to other groups goes to Chloé and Nathan. But you know what? I'm going to jump back to due diligence. I'm going to go to Matteo because I think that you've seen, it's always interesting, you've seen yesterday the chair of the Employment Committee talked about the dismantling of workers' rights in the Parliament. You saw Estelle Koelemans from the Socialists and Democrats talking about the dangers of that. You had Mark Botenga from the left group. There's a coalition of progressive groups that see the danger. But then we talk about this forced labor, child labor. So it goes down to labor inspectors. So Matteo, I think, labor inspectors sometimes can be left to their own devices, but you've made strides in engaging with the unions and bringing the unions in there. Can you tell us about that experience a little bit before we go to Nathan and Chloé, please?
Grazie. I will speak in Italian if I can. Thank you. Allora, grazie mille per questa opportunità che Eurocadre ci ha dato. Proprio con Eurocadre è stato avviato da 2 anni ormai un progetto che ha messo assieme ispettori del lavoro di più parti d'Europa. Ci sono, vedo anche appunto qui in sala dei compagni dalla Francia, dalla Spagna, e c'erano anche ispettori del lavoro dal Belgio, dalla Finlandia, diverse parti d'Europa. L'obiettivo era quello di innanzitutto mettere assieme questi lavoratori a confronto per verificare i modelli organizzativi dell'ispezione del lavoro in Europa. È venuto fuori naturalmente come ci siano modelli organizzativi diversi. Al di là di questo, al di là di questi aspetti formali, ciò che è venuto fuori in generale è che l'ispezione sul lavoro in Europa è sotto attacco. Fondamentalmente ci sono poche risorse economiche, gli ispettori del lavoro si riducono, aumentano i carichi di lavoro e aumentano anche collegati i rischi psicosociali, i rischi di stress sul lavoro, naturalmente. Tutto questo è esattamente collegato a ciò che diceva adesso chi mi ha preceduto. L'economia sempre di più non vuole ostacoli e l'ispezione del lavoro è considerata come un ostacolo, non è considerata come un'opportunità per uno sviluppo più equo e sostenibile. E quindi gli ispettori del lavoro non devono essere messi nelle condizioni di poter lavorare. Il progetto che con Eurocadre era stato portato avanti si è poi sviluppato ad Helsinki con una dichiarazione congiunta di Eurocadre ed ETUC, con cui si evidenziavano questi problemi e si evidenziava la necessità quindi di tutelare l'ispezione sul lavoro, di dare maggiore attenzione. Si è proseguito su questa strada nelle scorse settimane al Parlamento europeo con una iniziativa organizzata dal parlamentare europeo Anthony Smith. Eravamo anche qui diversi di noi, organizzazioni sindacali, c'era Eurocadre, c'era Françoise Gang di EPSU, e l'obiettivo è quello di portare all'attenzione delle istituzioni europee questo tema. A questo proposito io uso sempre una espressione, una metafora. L'ispezione sul lavoro sta diventando sempre più una sorta di foglia di fico. Ci sono problemi, diciamo che gli ispettori la risolvono. Si fanno delle norme e si fa finta di dimenticare che poi però non ci sono ispettori sul lavoro, che non hanno le risorse, non hanno gli strumenti, non sono ben collegati tra di loro e quindi, come dire, ci si lava la coscienza a livello normativo dicendo mettiamo la norma, che sia una direttiva, un regolamento, una norma di legge nazionale, per dire che ci sono gli ispettori del lavoro e siamo tutti a posto. Non è così. È evidente che c'è un tema, e il tema è appunto la necessità di rafforzare questo sistema come contrappeso proprio riguardo all'espandersi di un'economia capitalistica che non vuole ostacoli di nessun genere. E qui mi riaggancio all'altro aspetto che è l'oggetto del nostro panel. Come facciamo ad andare oltre la nostra bolla? La necessità quindi di aprire una connessione sempre più forte tra l'organizzazione sindacale e lavoratori direttamente interessati. Sotto questo aspetto il progetto che è stato portato avanti da Eurocadre e l'interesse che poi anche ETUI ha sempre di più manifestato, per cui ci saranno degli eventi che verranno organizzati con un focus specifico sull'ispezione sul lavoro, serve a dimostrare come sia importante mettere al centro, come si diceva appunto all'inizio, gruppi di lavoratori, parlare con gruppi di lavoratori. È importante ricordare che la dichiarazione congiunta di ETUI e Eurocadre di Helsinki è stata scritta congiuntamente da rappresentanti sindacali e ispettori del lavoro. Quindi insieme i lavoratori e i loro rappresentanti hanno elaborato un documento. E questo, se vogliamo, ci riporta un po' alle origini stesse del movimento sindacale, che nasce come gruppi di lavoratori che si mettono insieme per tutelare interessi che non sono soltanto i loro, ma sono più ampi, sono quelli collettivi. Ed è probabilmente questo ciò a cui noi dobbiamo sempre di più pensare, se non vogliamo immaginare una trasformazione del movimento sindacale in un movimento semplicemente burocratico, in cui si parla di lavoro ma non ci sono i lavoratori. E questo è evidentemente una prospettiva che anche a livello nazionale, se penso al sindacato di cui faccio parte, si sta cercando di portare avanti, aprendosi sempre di più alla società, alle associazioni ambientaliste, alle associazioni di tutela dei diritti dei lavoratori, delle persone LGBTQI+, e così via. Cioè è fondamentale che il sindacato si apra sempre di più alla società latamente intesa. Venendo ancora alla parte che riguarda l'ispezione sul lavoro, è fondamentale anche che quindi in questa interlocuzione, se penso appunto a ciò che si diceva riguardo ai lavoratori delle piattaforme, quindi queste nuove forme di lavoro, è fondamentale avere un'interlocuzione con chi prova a cercare di tutelare questi lavoratori. In Italia ci sono state diverse operazioni di vigilanza nei confronti dei lavoratori delle piattaforme che hanno portato esattamente al risultato che adesso si diceva. Questi non sono lavoratori autonomi, sono lavoratori dipendenti perché non hanno la possibilità di poter organizzare il proprio lavoro. Tutto ciò è frutto di ispezioni che sono state fatte a livello nazionale e quindi ecco come determinati risultati vanno entrambi sulla stessa strada. È fondamentale quindi aprire un'interlocuzione sempre di più con questi gruppi di lavoratori, potremmo dire operatori qualificati, che possono dare una mano alle organizzazioni sindacali, per quello che ci riguarda, su una serie di questioni. Si parlava per esempio adesso di appalti e subappalti. Noi in Italia abbiamo un tema enorme riguardo al tema dei subappalti. Come CGIL abbiamo anche proposto un referendum che purtroppo non ha raggiunto la maggioranza dei voti, perché stiamo verificando come la stragrande maggioranza degli infortuni sul lavoro che abbiamo in Italia, solo nel 2024 in Italia abbiamo avuto oltre 1200 morti sul lavoro, una cifra spaventosa, significa 3 morti al giorno in media sul lavoro. Tutto questo accade all'interno della catena dei subappalti, perché le aziende in subappalto non rispettano le regole e quindi diventa molto molto difficile risalire alla catena dei subappalti. Ecco la necessità quindi di intervenire Tutto questo viene anche da quelli che sono i risultati delle ispezioni sul lavoro, del rapporto che ogni anno l'Ispettorato sul lavoro pubblica e che dice esattamente questi dati. Ecco, mettendo insieme tutte queste cose diventa quindi fondamentale un'azione sinergica del movimento sindacale insieme ai lavoratori e insieme a tutte le altre organizzazioni e associazioni della società che possono evidentemente limitare quantomeno o addirittura invertire la tendenza. Mi fermo, grazie.
Grazie, Matteo. Thank you very much. Yeah, and also, I mean, Isabelle was just mentioning platform workers. We go on to platform workers, and I don't know if I'm going to talk about platform workers right away, Chloe, but we're going to go on. I think it'd be nice to go to you because it's about coalition building. And the coalition building, you know, it's one side of the application, or one side of the equation, but it's also, how would you say it, to amplifying it. So I think that you are well suited to be able to share with us, you know, because your content has exposed some of the biggest corporate lobbyists and such on the other side of what we just talked about, who we need to put on one side. We're talking about the other side here. So how did it come back? How do you find that it has an impact on your approach when coalitions are being built?
Thank you very much for the invite. Before I'll answer your question, Tom, I just wanted to give you a very concrete example of how I personally and the Citizens Collective that I'm part of have collaborated with the unions at different levels, because they're very concrete and maybe they can be useful. So I come from a climate movement, right? So I was part of the climate strike, and then I worked in various NGOs, and I was involved in different Citizens Collective, and we've always, I'm from Belgium, just so that you locate geographically, and know the context. And we were always, I think from quite the beginning, really interested in building coalitions with other groups, right? Because we realized very quickly that we wouldn't get that far on our own. And so the way we collaborated with unions range from doing advocacy together to calls for strike together to, just campaigning in general. And some very concrete example, I think that was the first one, is there was a law that was proposed in Belgium that would basically affect the right to strike, right? So the purpose of the law was to say, if some people are arrested in the context of a strike and they're considered guilty of whatever, they might not be able to strike for several years after that. And we realized, the unions obviously were realizing that this was targeting them, and especially their leaders. And because we organized quite a lot of strike back then and a lot of marches, we also felt really threatened. And so we decided to work together to actually do advocacy and campaigning on that. So we went together to the parties, including with Estelle Schömann before she became an MEP, and we talked to the political groups, and we did campaigning together. We mobilized citizens together to sign petitions, etc. That was a very concrete and very powerful collaboration, because eventually, before the current government, sadly, that law was withdrawn. Something else that we did, there was a massive mobilization 2 days ago in Belgium, 140,000 people. And what we did is we collaborated with the head of a union in Belgium, which is called Thierry Boxon, and we did a mobilizing video together, because obviously we have very different audiences. But that's what makes these kind of collaborations so powerful, because he talks to his audience on social media and inside the unions, and we're going to talk to our audience, but basically we come with the same message: mobilize on the 14th of October. We also campaigned quite a lot on the due diligence regulation. Once again, different tactics, different methods, but behind the scenes, huge collaboration, and eventually we're reaching different audiences. And then a final example, and I will come to your question, is we are currently working with The Bridge, an organization that I co-created a few months ago, on basically bridging the gap that currently exists between European decision-making that is very complex, very opaque, very difficult for people, and groups and collectives at the national level that understand the importance of the European level, but they don't have the time, they don't have the capacity to follow everything, so we try to bridge that gap. And the first concrete project that we're doing this on is the Clean Industrial Deal. Like, how do we actually have an industry that thrives, but that is also fair and sustainable in Europe? And one of the things that we're doing is collaborating with the unions on several fronts. So at the European level, very concretely, this was us going to the unions and being like, honestly, we don't understand this file. It's so complicated, help us out. And then we'll translate that because that's where we're good at. And we'll go to the national groups at the national level and we'll be like, you guys should definitely campaign on the clean industrial deal and give them some concrete talking points, concrete information. And the union I'm thinking about, ETUC, for instance, were super open to that. And they really helped us understand. And they answered all our questions, including the maybe stupid ones that we had. And then what we did is we basically translated all that information and we went back to the national groups. And the national groups are so interested in working on that and they're very grateful for that broken down information. And then at the national level, they're also doing the outreach work to unions and collaborating. And together we publish op-eds, we do social media posts together, we do calls to action. So these are very concrete examples of successful, according to me, collaboration that we've had with unions in the past. And to answer your question, yes, I'm very much an advocate of amplification and communication of ideas, right? So I created 2 series on social media, one which is called Meet Your Lobbyist, that is basically about exposing the really powerful lobbies that exist and that are very influential at the European level. And then another one is called Meet Your Billionaire, and the idea is to expose the European billionaires that have a super big impact on European politics, but also European media. And the reason for that is basically because there's all these really powerful entities that very few people know that have a huge impact on our daily lives. And the idea was really to lift the curtains and allow people not only to know who these actors are, but also then to mobilize people on European issues. And just to maybe circle back to why we're here today is, I think the amplification bit is super important if you want to mobilize, right? Because it's great to talk to your audience, but at some point, and I think that's the title of the panel as well, looking beyond the bubble, looking beyond your own audience as well. And when people reply to my content, a lot of the time, one of the first things that they say is, this is incredibly depressing, what can I do as an individual? You know, I can't come to Brussels and take on all the lobbies or take on all the billionaires. And one of the things that I always tell them in the first few most powerful and most impactful thing that they can do, especially because I'm talking to, let's say, a younger-ish audience, is join a union, basically. That's one of the most powerful things that you can do. And a lot of the time they're like, yes, that sounds cool, but how do I do, what do I do it? And so, I mean, I'm not an expert, so usually I redirect them to the website. But I do think that if we were to collaborate more, and I'm not just saying myself, but just these groups that we're in touch with that come more from the, let's say, climate, economic transition movement, and the unions, we would be incredibly powerful. And I'm just going to end with, there's been, I wasn't there yesterday, but it seems like there's been a lot of talk about the rise of the far right and how this is impacting all of the things that we are working on and all of the things that we are trying to change. There's been a massive power shift, right, with these elections. And it's getting increasingly difficult to get our message across, if possible at all. Like, I know a lot of NGOs that are saying, we don't even have meetings with EPP MEPs anymore. They don't want to talk to us. They don't want to listen to the numbers, the facts. So ideologically, there's been a massive power shift. And so I think we're at a time where we all, individually, as collectives, but also together, really need to rethink our tactics if we want to bring the power back to some place where we can influence. And I think that's going to be difficult, and we have a few years to think about how we do that and implement that, but we really need to do it all together. And yeah, all get out of our comfort zone, all accept to compromise, because how often have I heard, yeah, but the climate movement can't ally with the unions because you guys don't have the same demands. Well, I mean, actually, if we talk to each other, we realize that we have way more in common than we have different. So yeah, if we're able to collaborate way more, I think that's, for me, the only way that we're going to be able to actually try to influence some of these politics. Because otherwise, we're just going to be sitting on the benches for the next 5 years, and we're going to lose 5 crucial years for social and environmental progress, and we can't afford that.
Thank you very much, Chloé. I had to put my microphone down to clap. Sorry about that. So then it goes to you, Nathan. This is the question that's, I think, pass you a microphone. Yeah, that's, it'd be good to get the translation. So I think, you know, you've been, just on what Chloé ended with on the fossil-free, you know, fossil fuels and the climate working together with trade unions. I think that Isabelle also mentioned it when we talked about due diligence. I guess, can you maybe share with us about organizing workers in NGOs and organizing in your community and how that's been able to link up with the greater scheme of getting people involved in the work?
Yeah, thanks a lot, and it's great to be here. Yeah, so I'm here speaking on behalf of my work, which is fossil-free politics. It's my day job, but I'm also a worker. I'm also working in an NGO in Brussels during this big social movement that's been going on since the new government's been in place. And it's been really interesting having this experience doing on the more institutional side, countering the influence of fossil fuel lobbying on an NGO level, and then also trying to place myself as a worker within this common struggle that we have. And yeah, I mean, to get straight to the question, it's been really interesting trying to sort of make all other NGO workers in the sort of Brussels bubble see themselves as workers, as people fighting for our own collective rights in our workplaces, and how does that get impacted by the broader structural things that are going on around us. There's attacks on NGOs, there's the deregulation, everything we've been talking about in the panel so far. That really comes down to impact our individual work. There's friends of mine have been laid off already. Overnight cuts from funding coming from the US or coming from the Commission or coming from private philanthropy that's changing their tactics as a response to this shift in the political scene. So to see ourselves as part of that struggle really has actually made the coalition building for my work much easier. And it's kind of been a bit of a win-win there, where the people I've met over the past few months on literally the picket lines in Belgium has then now helped my work. And it wasn't this sort of cynical, mercenary way of, oh, if I do this, then it'll help me do my day job. It's just a happy, it's not quite a coincidence, it's literally how power is built, is by meeting people and seeing what they're working on and building these coalitions outside of our respective bubbles. So I think that's been, it's been really interesting seeing how that has been done. I've built upon experiences of people who have worked in this sector much longer than I have. There's an existing organization network called FAIR CSOs, FAIR Civil Society Organizations, and they are very close ties with the trade unions on the European level in Brussels, and they've been organizing NGO workers. Through that, that's then allowed us to mobilize workers on a big scale from workplaces that traditionally don't get involved in the kind of more local national politics in Brussels. And that's been, it's been really, yeah, an amazing thing to see, where people who've maybe been written off by maybe the trade union movement or maybe the local national politics, these people don't care. They come, they work in Belgium for a bit, and then they leave. In fact, it's complete opposite. It's, we're all affected by the same laws. We have Belgian contracts for the most part. And yeah, we've seen some big successes there, where we mobilized for the first ever international NGO picket, where I think I met Paula, who's in the room over there. So I'm meeting people on the picket line. We had over 100 people show up in the morning for one of the general strikes in March, I think. And ever since then, we've had a presence at every mass mobilization. On Tuesday, we had a block in the International Solidarity block with other Belgian NGOs, so we're creating those links. So yeah, so that's been really, really fundamental to see how I now approach my work. I think I've tried to keep my work life and then more activist side sort of separate, but a background in organizing and actually building coalitions across different sectors has really helped then come back to the work. In Fossil Free Politics, the organization, it's a coalition of over 200 members, and by necessity that has to be building coalitions and reaching out across beyond the usual suspects, as we've been saying. By and large, it's mostly climate organizations for now, but as it's evolved over the past few years, in response to energy crisis, there's been energy poverty, more social justice groups have come on board to the coalition. And then now with the rise of the right wing in the European level of politics and also on national levels, we're realizing that, as Chloé said, the advocacy and the traditional things that NGOs have done isn't really reaching the same people as before. And our analysis is that now we have to really push on our network development and build these coalitions and reach out. And that's why I'm really happy to be invited to speak at this today, because it's exactly these sort of places where we should be talking about the issues and building these actual relationships. Because when these, when it's the billionaires, as Chloe says, who are kind of shadowy behind the scenes, they've got the money. There's corporate capture of our institutions. They've got all the political power. The states have the monopoly on violence. What are we going to do? We can't fight back against this through the traditional means. We have to organize. And how do we organize? It's joining trade unions. And I think that's the key approach to this, especially for climate. It's if we're going to do any of this in time, we don't have time, as people keep reminding us. We're losing the climate battle. How are we going to affect change on the scale and at the speed that we need to actually, to save the world from climate change? And that necessitates who has the power, and that's the workers. The trade unions are the only organizations that have access to that organizational power that we can call upon to actually affect that change. And we can go into many different details about how to actually do that. But I think that's the thing that I think bridges the climate movement and the trade union movement, is that we need each other. As we've seen, the climate is impacting all the different union movements around the world, whether some of them have realized it or not, it will. And we need to be there and provide answers and provide policies and solutions that workers can feel protected. But then at the same time, we need to have these workers on our side so that, we can shut down capital, we can go on strike, we can leverage our collective power to affect the change that we actually need. So I think it's not two separate things. It's entirely connected, and love to discuss further with the panel about how we can do that and reach out. But yeah, I think organizing on top of the mobilization, on top of the amplification communication, it's the only way that we're going to be able to actually counter the power of the lobbies that are behind all of this. And I think that's the thing I'll finish on, is that a lot of the time it is quite depressing. You see that the lobbies have really captured all of the policy discussions on the European level. Businesses have access to the money, the communications. They have more people than we do, and it does feel a bit defeatist sometimes to be like, how are we going to counter that? But it's not a case of us having to come up with new ideas. We don't need any new ideas as such. The people already have all the ideas. We already know what we need to do. There's just this select few of people who are getting in our way and disrupting it. And through fossil-free politics and through other organizations, it's about getting rid of that layer of infiltration and disruption to get them out of the way so that we can actually affect the change that the people have already come up with. So,
thank you very much, Nathan. Very, very, very interesting. So listen, so we've got about 10 minutes left, and I have quite a few questions for the panelists, but I think in the spirit of what they were all saying is reaching out to other groups, perhaps another group than just us sitting up here. So I think that we'd like to take a question, and the more questions that you have, the more we can discuss. So I will ask you to ask your question and to respond as briefly and as intelligently as I know that you all can do. So anybody have any questions? Got a question over here, got a question here. I don't know, Ilka, if you want me to go to the mic. I mean, I need some exercise too, so.
Start with Chloé and work my way up, yeah.
Okay, we'll go Chloé first and then we'll go back.
Thank you, Ilka. Bonjour, thank you so much for the panel. My name is Chloé as well. I'm a trade unionist, but I'm also a climate activist. I actually started in the NGO movement, and one of my questions is sometimes it's difficult to talk the same language when we're in a group and we try to reach out to different communities, and I find it sometimes hard to reconcile the trade union language, the NGO or climate language, and the political language. You mentioned the necessity to translate or like reach out to national groups. and explain to them what the EU policies were and how they worked. And I was wondering how do you, in each of your, my question is mostly to Chloé, but I would be also interested to hear about others. How do you work beyond that language barrier, let's say? Is it a question of trust, of working with the same people? Because also one of the difficulties is that we can have a big turnover in our movements, so sometimes it's hard to keep track of the people. So how do you reconcile and go beyond that language barrier? Thank you.
Thanks, Chloé. Yeah, we're just going to take several. We're going to take those three over there, and then we'll go to the panel, if that's fine with you all. Yeah, very good.
Hi, my name is Lucas, and this is a question that I've been thinking about a lot, and I feel like it's the good panel to address this. It's we were talking about how it feels as if young people don't have the same relationship to unionism and to trade unions that we had in the past, and that's for various reasons. But more on the trade union side, do you feel that there's anything you can learn with regards to getting the younger people in to trade unions through NGOs and how they've used social media or different ways of engagement? But also, more to the point, is for young people, I speak by experience, the entry-level jobs offer way less security, where I'll take my example again, the only unions I could join recently were unions for freelance workers, and that's not quite the same thing. So what's the sort of, is there a strategy going on within trade unions about how to engage young workers, keep them, and also offering them, if they don't have job security, at least have sort of protection through unions?
Thank you very much, Lucas. One more question, then we'll go to the panel, and if we have time, we'll go back.
Oui, je vais parler en français, donc je vous laisse mettre vos casques, ça va être plus simple. Bonjour, je suis Pablo Iquel, secrétaire général du syndicat national des journalistes de la CGT, également vice-président de la Fédération européenne des journalistes. Et il se trouve que chez les journalistes, il y a une particularité pour les journalistes indépendants, en tout cas en France. Il y a une présomption de contrat de travail depuis 50 ans, qui s'appelle la loi Cressard. Ça permet à des journalistes indépendants comme moi, je n'ai pas un employeur permanent, mais j'ai un employeur beaucoup plus important que les autres, d'être élu du personnel dans le Conseil social et économique, participer à la représentation des travailleurs, et on a droit à la négociation collective. Ailleurs en Europe, ce n'est pas le cas, ce sont des freelances, et on s'est énormément battu à la Fédération européenne des journalistes pour obtenir les guidelines qui sont sortis il y a 3 ans, je crois, qui devaient permettre un peu de négociation collective. Pour l'instant, ça ne marche pas énormément, mais on en a parlé avec Michael McGrath la semaine dernière. Quand je vous entends, notamment Jane, mais aussi Isabelle, sur le fait qu'il y a de plus en plus de solo self-employed, de auto-entrepreneurs qui sont des faux auto-entrepreneurs et qui veulent accéder à la négociation collective, à la reconnaissance pour avoir de la sécurité sociale et de meilleures conditions de travail. Il y a eu la directive pour les travailleurs de plateforme. Aujourd'hui, de plus en plus, on a des gens qui viennent toquer à la porte. À la Fédération du spectacle de la CGT, on a des youtubeurs, des influenceuses, des graphistes d'Instagram qui viennent nous aider.
Ta question.
Oui. Donc, concrètement, comment on peut faire pour partager mieux ces luttes des travailleurs faux indépendants? Parce que j'ai l'impression qu'il n'y a pas de particularités que chez nous. En fait, il y a plein de particularités partout. Et à l'échelle d'Eurocadre, ça peut être intéressant de voir comment on travaille ensemble.
Merci beaucoup. And okay, so we do have Ilka. If you don't mind, we don't have time for this question, but if you can go quickly, we can ask that question. Okay, camarade?
Août de la CFDT. Juste pour savoir comment vous avez fait pour contacter des sociétés plutôt conservatrices comme l'Église protestante et Caritas. Parce que j'ai aussi travaillé avec vous avec l'Église protestante, donc sur l'argent notamment.
Merci beaucoup. Alors, so let's go. I think we start with maybe Chloe, I know that you wanted to talk about speaking the same language. We'll go to that one, and then we'll go to different relationship. Young people, please.
Yeah, I'll try to be quick on that. Thank you for your question. Yes, several things. I think we don't necessarily need to speak the same language as the politicians. I think that's the first thing, depending on, obviously, if you're doing advocacy, yes, but if you're doing mobilization, comms, or capacity building between unions and activists or climate movement, you don't necessarily need to speak that politician language. So at least that removes one. And then in terms of communication, what I usually do is very simple. I have the person that shoots my content that doesn't understand anything about European politics. So if I see that she's behind the camera and she's like, I don't understand anything, then I'll have to rewrite the whole thing. So it's really putting yourself in the shoes of someone who's 15 years old and who's never heard about the topic that you're trying to talk. That's the way I translate my content, at least. And then in terms of getting to a common position, for instance, with the trade unions, you're right, and that's a little bit of the annoying part, is that it requires a lot of personal relationship, because you want to get to a point where you're not afraid of saying, this doesn't work for me, it needs to be changed. So sadly, this is, to me, it's like everything in today's world, right? You need to build these relationships, and you need to get to a point where you feel comfortable enough to be able to say that doesn't work, these words need to change. I'm thinking about joint position, for instance. It's a lot of back and forth. Eventually, we've always gotten there, but it requires people that are okay with compromise. And then just maybe just very briefly on the following question, which was about how to get more young people involved in the unions. I don't have the answer because I'm not on the union side, but I fully agree with you. Like, the comment that I get quite a lot when I tell people join a union is, yeah, but I don't feel like I fit. I don't feel like there's a space for me. So I would be really keen to know what the answer is as well. That's what I'll say.
Nathan, I think you had something to add on that, did you not?
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know how young I still am, but I am also a former freelancer, and I had exactly the same problem as not knowing where to unionize as well. So I think my response to both the language question, the auto-entrepreneur question, and the young people thing is to just get organized. And that seems easier said than done, but it doesn't have to be with a trade union either. If you can't find your real spot, I think we can say to young people, like, get involved and get doing stuff. And through that, you'll build these coalitions and meet new people that'll help. And that's how I ended up getting unionized myself, as I was organized in other struggles. And I think, especially on the young people question, which is always asked, young people aren't any different than any of the rest of us, have the same material interests. You're still the same exploited in different ways, perhaps, but it's about showing that, we're not specifically a different type of species. It's like you're still exploited. And it's, what motivates us, what are our shared interests. And I think, coming back to it's what motivates the masses, and looking around us and seeing what is the thing that will get people out in the streets, but also get people to take time out of their busy days to get organized and actually come around. And I think a few years ago, it could have been the climate strikes. As Chloé mentioned, there was a lot of young people involved in that. And then the energy kind of dissipated around COVID. And I've had climate movement people say to me, like, hey, where are all the climate people? Like, the climate strikes aren't there anymore. The climate movement doesn't seem as big. And my answer is that the same people are still in the streets. They're there for Palestine right now. And that's where there's this huge, big movement. And in Belgium at the minute, we have this kind of twin prong of Palestine movement and the social, and they're both very overlapped. And I think that's what the challenge is for all of us, is find what people are motivated by and where they are, and meet them there and organize them. And then from there, we can keep going.
Thanks very much, Nathan. And just on the partager les luttes avec celui de la France et plutôt la question freelance, et une question plutôt pour toi, Isabelle, aussi. On n'a pas le temps. Alors si tu peux répondre un peu, camarade.
J'y vais. On y va. Donc, les leçons que le mouvement syndical européen a tirées de notre coopération, qui a marché très fortement, très bien, jusqu'au point où on a adopté une directive en 2024 sur le devoir de vigilance. C'est un succès, et ça reste un succès. Et ce n'est pas le seul. Pour moi, ça a été de s'ouvrir à ces mouvements-là, potentiellement d'apprendre, non pas de parler le même langage, mais d'apprendre ce langage-là et le traduire en langage syndical quand j'avais à convaincre mes collègues en interne. De décomplexifier la situation institutionnelle européenne et nationale, parce que c'est très complexe, et le mouvement syndical lui-même est potentiellement assez bureaucratique, peut-être aussi beaucoup mieux organisé que certaines associations, et donc on a des processus peut-être plus longs de mise en place, je dirais pas de position commune, mais peut-être de courrier commun, où on a le même message, mais chez nous, il faut que ça passe par 3 personnes avec 5 signatures avant que ça arrive. Voilà. Alors que dans d'autres organisations, il y a une réaction beaucoup plus rapide. Et ça aussi, on y travaille en interne pour être sûr que si c'est moi qui est en charge du devoir de vigilance, c'est moi qui ai la signature et je n'ai pas besoin de faire le tour de 3 personnes ou 4 personnes. Donc je pense que là, il y a une dimension très... d'apprentissage commun. Et ce n'est pas nous qui imposons, au contraire. Je crois qu'on s'adapte et on s'adapte beaucoup plus facilement. Merci de passer ce message. Si vous avez besoin de solidarité, d'unité et de protection, allez voir le mouvement syndical. Merci pour ça, parce que c'est exactement ce qu'on propose. Et en fait, la réponse aux jeunes, c'est qu'est-ce que vous avez besoin pour être bien sur le lieu de votre travail? Quelles sont vos demandes à vous, plutôt que d'imposer nos demandes à nous, tout en leur démontrant à ces jeunes qui arrivent sur le marché du travail ou qui sont déjà dans l'emploi, même dans des emplois cap, comme on a entendu ce matin, très rapidement après la fac ou après des études. Qu'est-ce qui t'intéresse toi? Qu'est-ce que tu as besoin? Est-ce que c'est le temps de travail? Est-ce que c'est le congé parental? Est-ce que c'est la formation? Est-ce que c'est l'accès à des soins qui t'intéressent? Qu'est-ce que le mouvement syndical peut faire pour toi, plutôt que de dire on a besoin de toi, viens, mais pour le coup, ce dont tu as besoin, on ne l'a pas encore préparé. Et je pense que c'est ces dimensions très concrètes. Et pour répondre à une question très particulière qui a été qu'est-ce qu'on fait pour les jeunes? On a au niveau de la Confédération européenne des syndicats un comité permanent, c'est-à-dire un comité statutaire pour les jeunes et pour les femmes. Et en fait, mon job à moi, parce que je suis responsable du comité femmes, c'est d'aller chercher dans le comité jeunes, ces jeunes femmes qui, après avoir été dans le comité jeunes, ne savent plus où aller, qu'elles viennent chez nous avec leurs demandes, plutôt que de nous d'imposer notre liste de revendications. On les a, on travaille dessus et on se bat pour ça. On se bat pour la transparence salariale, mais il y a peut-être plus que ça que ces jeunes syndicalistes veulent voir et veulent nous faire comprendre. Et je pense que là, on a un travail plutôt humble par rapport à des jeunes sur le marché du travail, et aussi aller dans des endroits où on ne nous attend pas. Je pense que c'est très important, même, je dirais, au niveau des écoles, au niveau des facs. Je suis toujours indignée qu'au niveau des facultés en France, des universités en France, mais même en Allemagne et dans d'autres pays, même en Belgique, le mouvement syndical n'est pas au programme des formations sur le droit du travail, sur le droit de la sécurité sociale, sur le droit social en Europe, sur l'Europe. Et on n'est même pas au courant en France, par exemple, où on ne transmet pas ce savoir, que le mouvement syndical a le pouvoir d'un co-législateur en Europe. C'est nous qui faisons les directives européennes sociales, ce n'est pas la Commission européenne. Et si la Commission européenne, et je finirai par cela, nous propose, nous consulte 2 fois et nous demande si nous devons négocier, il doit être clair que c'est à nous de savoir si nous voulons négocier. Et si ce n'est pas possible, nous ne négocierons pas. Et pour conclure sur le panel d'hier où la partie patronale nous disait on nous propose, on va toujours dire oui, c'est fini. C'est fini cette situation où on s'est fait avoir, où la partie patronale, qui n'était pas celle représentée hier, mais celle qui a, je dirais, la main sur l'ensemble du patronat européen, nous a menés en bateau, nous a fait croire que nous aurions un accord sur le droit à la déconnexion. Nous avions un texte, et il a été dit hier, ce texte est valable. Juste après plus d'1 an de négociations, la partie patronale s'est retirée. Ça, ce n'est pas de la bonne foi. Ça, c'est gagner du temps pour nous empêcher de rendre le dossier à la Commission européenne, parce que nous négocions dans l'ombre de la loi, et cette ombre, elle est une lumière pour nous si on n'a pas la possibilité, parce qu'on doit être 2 pour négocier. Si on est tout seul, il faut qu'on ait la possibilité soit de dire non parce qu'il n'y a pas de mandat. Et je voudrais rappeler que sur les comités d'entreprise européens qui a été voté la semaine dernière par le Parlement européen, le patronat n'avait pas de mandat. Mais le patronat nous a toujours dit, nous négocions notre mandat, attendez-nous, nous allons. Mais oui, mais quel mandat? Et vous savez, vous êtes des négociateurs. Au niveau national, sectoriel ou européen, il faut un petit peu avoir une idée de sur quoi on peut négocier, de sur quoi on ne peut pas négocier. On ne peut pas aller avec un chèque en blanc à la négociation. Et c'est exactement ça que le mouvement patronal européen n'a pas accepté. Donc, s'il y a une possibilité de négociation, oui, sur les négociations à venir, et il y en a quelques-unes qui pourraient être mises en place, nous ne négocierons que s'il y a un mandat et s'il y a une bonne foi du côté patronal. Nous avons un mandat, nous allons travailler nos mandats, nous avons un comité exécutif qui décide de notre mandat, mais nous ne négocierons pas à n'importe quel prix.
Merci beaucoup, Isabelle. Okay, that brings us to the end of the panel. I do want to thank all the panelists, Chloé, Matteo, Isabelle, Nathan, and Jane, and thank you to the interpreters, and thank you all for giving us a couple more minutes to finish the points and the answers to the questions. And I believe, Nyla, is there a coffee? Is there a break? Is there? There is. Okay, then I'm not speaking wrongly. So thank you very much, and I give you the floor back. It's better for you.